father and son survived.
The gunshots went off and shock.
And for police, a story that doesn't add up.
There were some definite indicators on the scene that something was odd.
Who was behind this vicious attack?
I was shouting inside, well, what if that's my fault?
And could they strike again?
You feel you are living with a murderer.
I think everybody knows horrible things can happen, but you just don't expect it.
Murder in the family. Welcome to 2020 on OWN. I'm John Quinones. The bonds of flesh run deep within a family, but sometimes things can go terribly wrong, and it can take years to uncover what triggered the collapse. Kent Whitaker and his wife Tricia believed they had done a good job raising their sons, Bart and Kevin. But as Mary Fulginiti first reported in 2009, a night of family celebration was about to end in bloody murder and leave Kent with a lingering question. Why?
Sugar Land, Texas. A safe, loving, embracing community of beautiful neighborhoods and parks, shattered by the unthinkable. A model American family ambushed as they arrive home from a happy dinner out.
Somebody just shot our neighbor.
A gunman shoots all four, killing the mother and one son and wounding the other son and father.
One subject right now is shot in the arm. Apparently the whole family's been shot.
But what makes this crime even more incomprehensible is this. The surviving son is now on Texas death row awaiting execution for masterminding the plot to murder his own family.
I was the sort of, evil James Bond guy,
This was your idea?
It was my idea.
You wanted to kill your family?
I did.
And he came very close to getting away with the perfect crime. A cold-blooded killer lurking inside a seemingly loving son of a beautiful family.
Did you feel like you were living the American dream?
I think if anybody looked at our life, they would say those guys have it.
Kent Whitaker, a successful manager in the family construction business. His wife of 28 years, Tricia, a former teacher turned full-time mom, and their two sons, Bart and Kevin.
There's going to be an Easter bunny popping up here in just a second.
Look at mine.
Get back in line, you little nerd.
Family videos paint a warm tableau of a loving, prosperous, God-fearing family enjoying the good life.
Bart, let's see those ears. Who's ready for Christmas?
A succession of holiday celebrations.
Merry Christmas! Yes! 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 Kevin, look what you got.
I see one right here.
I get it! I get it! Happy birthday, dear Kevin!
The birthdays of Kevin and his big brother, Bart.
Happy birthday,
He looked up to me and wanted to be me, and I thought that was so ironic because I wanted to be him.
They played with each other from the time that Kevin was old enough to do it.
Kevin, this one needs working too.
Up until the end. They did stuff together.
What was your relationship like with your parents?
It was a good relationship.
How about your brother?
Kevin was incredible. We were very much opposites. All of the things that he was great at, I was pretty sorry at, and some of the things that I was good at, he wasn't so good at. So we were polar opposites, but we got along very well.
Your family tried to love you.
It was idyllic, yeah.
Hey, Bart, drive down the street to the stop sign for me.
From the moment Bart learned to ride a two-wheeler, he and his father shared a passion for biking.
We tried to figure it out one time and ended up with about 15,000 miles that we've ridden together.
So what went wrong, Bart?
I was always an independent child, and I think somewhere along in there, can we stop for a second?
What's bothering you right now?
No, just, it's all a lot thinking back on all those days.
Let's say, Bart.
What?
I think everybody knows horrible things can happen, but you just don't expect it.
I had been at church with my family eating dinner and had just gotten home, and my pager went off telling me to call the police department.
Even for Homicide Sergeant Marshall Slott, horrible things don't happen very often in Sugar Land. A typical week would be a couple of burglary investigations and maybe a robbery.
The dispatcher told me that 4 people had been shot. I initially thought she was joking with me, and I said, "You're kidding, right?" And she said, "No. I need you to respond to Sugar Lakes. A family of 4 has been shot."
The evening of December 10th, 2003 begins as a time for celebration at the Whitaker residence. Bart announces that he's finished his final exams and will soon graduate from college. His parents present him with a very expensive Rolex watch as a graduation gift.
We got ready for dinner, and we went to dinner.
Kent, Tricia, Bart, and his brother Kevin all go out to a popular local Cajun restaurant.
Was there laughter?
Lots of laughter, yeah. We were happy, and we were teasing each other, but then we did that whenever we were together.
As they celebrate his graduation, only Bart knows that an intruder has quietly entered their home.
Entered the house with the key and the alarm code.
Meanwhile, Kent snaps photos of his happy family. Bart with his favorite dessert, bread pudding, decorated to mark the occasion. Tricia posing with Bart and Kevin.
I'm going to show you a picture taken the night of the dinner.
Yeah, I took that after we finished eating. I bet you no more than 5 or 10 minutes before we left the restaurant, which was 5 minutes from our house.
Bart smiles, and yet he knows that if everything goes as planned, in less than 30 minutes, his brother, his mother, and his father will all be dead.
I don't really know a better term for how I was feeling other than I was in autopilot. I wasn't even aware of myself. We left the restaurant and drove back to the house.
And when we came back, Kevin led the way to the front door, and Tricia was behind him, and when he stepped in, that's when the shootings happened.
I went out to my car to get my cell phone, and I was walking back from the car when the first shots happened.
What are you feeling? At the time?
Nothing. Nothing at first, and then the gunshots went off, and shock.
When we come back, Kent Whitaker relives the details of the night his family was shot.
Tricia was right about here, and she stepped in and says, "Oh no.
Someone just shot our neighbors. Get over here."
And police began to suspect that all is not as it seems.
The drawers being pulled out like they were and not rifled was not typical of a burglary scene.
Stay with us. The Whitaker family has been ambushed in their home in Sugar Land, Texas. 2 are dead, 2 are wounded, and many questions remain. But as police review what happened the night of the murder, they uncover clues about one family member they at first didn't suspect. Did someone in the Whitaker family have a motive for murder? Here again, Mary Fuginiti.
This is Texas Death Row. An intelligent, well-mannered young man from a model family awaits execution.
You were raised by a loving family?
Mm-hmm.
Your mother loved you? Your father loved you? Your brother loved you? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
But you still decided to kill them.
I did.
23-year-old Bart Whitaker directed a plot to kill his family on the night they all went out to celebrate his graduation from college. He plays the role of the gracious man of the hour. Or does he?
You're smiling in the photo. This is like a half hour before your family's going to get gunned down. What were you feeling in that photo?
I was about as close to numb as a human being can get, I think.
His secret murder plot unfolds as Bart expects, just as he and his unwitting family arrive home.
Could have gone to the back door or the front. We came to the front. Kevin led the way, and Tricia was right behind him, and I followed her.
Kent, his wife Tricia, and younger son Kevin suspect nothing, even as Bart hangs back.
So Kevin opened the door, stepped inside, and I hear a loud noise. Tricia was right about here, and she stepped in and says, "Oh no," and there's another loud noise.
At the time, what were you feeling?
Nothing. Nothing at first, and then the gunshots went off, and shock.
So I step up and look inside the house for the first time. And about that time, I get hit hard in the right chest, spun around, and I ended up lying down with my head here and my feet right here. At that point, I called out to each one of them, and the only answer I got was some quiet, wet coughs from Tricia.
Oh, God, what are you thinking at this time?
Well, it's a nightmare.
A neighbor hears the shots and calls 911.
Someone just shot our neighbors. Get over here.
I know I ran into the house. They say I ran past my dad, but I don't even remember seeing him.
Play acting the role of hero, Bart runs through the house to the kitchen, just as the shooter is about to flee.
He said he almost caught him. He grabbed him, but the shooters turned, fired, and he jumped sideways and got hit in the left upper arm.
I do remember getting shot. I do vaguely remember making the 911 call.
And what did you say?
That I'd been shot. There was somebody in the house.
Okay, where have you been shot at, sir?
In my arm.
Okay, Bart, who shot you?
I don't know. That he went out the back door. I think I said that.
I pulled up about 3 houses down, and I pulled my weapon, and I started running through the yards to get to the Whitaker house.
First on the scene, Sugarland police officer Phil Prevost finds 19-year-old Kevin Whitaker dead where he fell, a single bullet in his chest. Tricia Whitaker also dies of a single gunshot wound soon after she's airlifted to the hospital. Miraculously, Kent Whitaker survives, being shot only in an arm. Also wounded, Bart makes for a convincing fourth victim.
Where are you in the house right now?
In the living room.
Okay, do you see the officers, Bart?
Yeah.
I asked him, I said, who are you? Who are you? And he said, I'm Bart. He said, I live here. This is my house. So I figured, you know, he belonged there, and I said, where's the bad guy?
Can you tell me anything about him at all, Bart? Did he sound black, white, Hispanic?
Maybe black.
You had yourself shot as part of this plan. Was that your idea?
Yeah. It was to distance me from the guilt.
So you were trying to throw the cops off in your mind.
Yeah.
And it works like a charm.
When we cleared the house, of course, the first thing we thought was that it was a burglary.
The crime scene that I was investigating was a burglary gone bad where the victims were shot by the suspect and the suspect fled the scene.
Homicide Sergeant Marshall Slott thinks he's looking for a burglar with bad timing.
We called out tracking dogs that night in an attempt to track the shooter.
The dogs pick up a scent in the house and follow it outside to a dead end. Sergeant Slott scans the crime scene for anything that might lead him to the killer. He finds drawers pulled open, as if by a burglar, a gun safe pried open, 4 spent shell casings, and on the kitchen floor, a 9mm handgun with 4 bullets missing from its clip. Investigators find no suspect fingerprints at the scene. They take the gun back to the crime lab for a closer look.
Initially, it was processed for latent fingerprints.
Investigator Max Hunter carefully tests the weapon and makes a hopeful discovery.
A partial latent fingerprint was developed on the upper part of the left side of the slide. It was a partial palm print, but that palm print did not have enough information in it. We couldn't identify it to any one particular person.
Tracking dogs identify the shooter's scent on the gun, but DNA analysis comes back negative. It seems the killer made a clean getaway.
It seemed like every piece of evidence that we collected, we ran into dead ends left and right.
Back to square one, Sergeant Slott and his partner, Detective Billy Bow, go to the hospital to interview the survivors, Kent and Bart Whitaker.
They were in separate rooms. So we first went to Kent Whitaker. Kent seemed somewhat at peace. He was obviously upset, but not crying. But he very much demanded that we catch who was responsible for committing this crime.
Lying in his hospital bed, Kent Whitaker is torn between emotional extremes. He wants revenge, but he also prays, asking God to give him the strength to do the impossible, forgive whoever was responsible.
And the moment that I did ask him to help me forgive, the strangest thing happened. This warm glow flowed over me just instantly. And I looked at my heart and I realized that desire for revenge had gone.
The thought that it might be his own son that he would need to forgive was the furthest thing from Kent Whitaker's mind.
When he told me that he had forgiven the shooter, I was shouting inside, well, what if that's my fault? And of course, I didn't have the courage to say anything at the time.
Were you feeling guilty?
Yeah, I was crushed.
If you felt so bad about what you had done there, how did you keep it in?
How do you face that? I don't know how to face that. Hiding it all from everybody else was sort of like hiding it from myself also. There was also the fear of this place.
All of Sugarland seems stricken with grief and outrage. More than 1,000 mourners, including Kent and Bart, attend the funeral for Tricia and Kevin. Local media can't get enough of the story.
Y'all leave, please. I can't tell you how many times I would wake up in that instant before you were totally awake, everything was fine, and you would think to yourself, why didn't he finish it? Now, I don't want to go through this.
And when you say finish it, you mean what?
I wish that the shooter had killed me too that night.
With the investigation hitting dead ends, Bart has good reason to believe he's gotten away with murder.
When we come back, Bart Whitaker's story begins to unravel.
Bart Whitaker had not graduated from Sam Houston State. He had not even been attending the university.
And a surprise witness makes a shocking claim.
Hey, Bart has asked me about making plans to kill his father, his mother, and his brother.
Stay with us.
Two dead, two wounded when a family of four arrives home from dinner after celebrating the oldest son, Bart Whitaker's, graduation from college. It's the scene of a horrific burglary gone awry. Or is it?
There are some things that stuck out in our minds as being odd, but nothing that we could really hang our hat on to say this is not what it appears.
To Sergeant Marshall Slott, the signs of burglary didn't seem quite right.
The drawers being pulled out like they were and not rifled through was not typical of a burglary scene.
Nor was the fact that the only thing missing from the house was the wounded son Bart's cell phone.
And the burglar leaves the gun, leaves all of the electronics, but takes a cell phone that we couldn't find in the scene. That was a real oddity that stuck out in everybody's mind.
It's the little details that can be the undoing of one who would devise the perfect crime. The first clues for police arise out of the Whitakers' Last Supper. It was a celebration of Bart's announcement that he had just graduated from Sam Houston State University. But
Bart Whitaker had not graduated from Sam Houston State.
A tiny imperfection in Bart's plot. But it became a big crack when Sergeant Slott noticed it, buried in a story in the Houston Chronicle.
He had not even been attending the university. He was listed in their records as a freshman on academic probation.
In Sergeant Slott's mind, Bart is now at least a person of interest.
At the time that you're celebrating this, are you enrolled in college?
I don't even remember. I don't think so.
You weren't graduating from college?
Certainly not, no.
We took that information immediately and went to Kent Whitaker first with it.
At the time, Kent and Bart are still in the hospital recovering from their bullet wounds.
We thought we were celebrating the upcoming graduation of our son.
Did you talk about his future?
He was supposed to be going to graduate school.
Graduate school for what?
He was going into law enforcement.
And what is your reaction when you learn from the police that Bart has lied about not only graduating from college, but going to college?
I realized, how could he be so stupid? I was so mad at him. I got in a wheelchair and I wheeled down to his room, and I just read him the riot act about how if he had been telling the truth, he would not be a suspect.
He may be a proven liar, but there's still no proof that Bart is a scheming killer. And then a cop with a long memory raises a big red flag when he remembers a police call to this house once before, 2 years earlier.
Trish and I were awakened by a phone call from the Sugar Land Police Department telling us that Waco police had contacted them that Bart was on his way down here to kill us. It was something that a friend overheard Bart talking to his roommate about, and they concluded that it was a misunderstanding that was based on the friend drinking, and that there was nothing to it.
Misunderstanding or not, in light of the murders, it's a critical new clue for Sergeant Slott.
We've got the burglary scene that just doesn't look just right. We now know that the son is not graduating from Sam Houston.
And now a prior instance of an alleged plot by Bart Whitaker to kill his family.
All those little pieces sent off bells and whistles in our heads, is thinking, we need to start looking at the son.
The police suggest to you that Bart's a suspect. Was that a possibility in your mind at the time?
I didn't believe it for a minute. No.
Indeed, Sergeant Slott has little more than a hunch about Bart and a lot of questions. How could Bart have staged a botched burglary where he purposefully gets himself shot? Who is the shooter? And why would the much-loved son of a close-knit and generous family want to kill them all? None of it makes sense.
Officer DuBose is going to be playing the part of the suspect.
So Sergeant Slott returns to the Whitakers' home for a video reenactment of the murders with the two survivors in identical arm slings still nursing their bullet wounds.
I hear it, bang! And the next thing I realize is I am lying down like this.
First with Kent, and then with Bart.
I got shot. I fell back into the couch and on the floor.
There were no other witnesses, so my only two sources of information, one of them is the father of the primary suspect, one of them is the primary suspect, so that was a juggling act.
A juggling act made worse by the fact that when they are released from the hospital, Bart moves back home to be with his father, an intended victim whose life Slott believes is now in danger. For the next 7 months, Bart spends every free moment with his father, playing the perfect son, studying the Bible.
He appeared as if he was really listening. And I told him, Bart, I can't read your heart. You're either 0% responsible or 100% responsible. The point is that I love you. God has allowed me to forgive everyone involved.
What did you learn in those 7 months?
He truly forgave the person that did this. I mean, he was the first real Christian that I'd ever met that really did what Jesus Christ told him to do.
He asked you point blank, did you do it, Bart? Because the cops were looking at you.
Yeah.
And you said, no, Dad.
Yeah, I did.
Even knowing he was going to forgive you.
Yeah, but it's not that simple. I didn't want to cause that pain on me primarily and on anyone else secondarily, so I just was I was a coward.
Do you feel like you were sort of duped during that period of time?
Well, of course I did. And duped is a nice word for it.
For 7 months, Sergeant Slott's investigation makes little progress. Then out of the blue, a huge break from an odd man who walks into the police station very late one night, describing himself as a former college friend of Bart's, Adam Hipp.
And then he dropped some bombs on me as far as, hey, Bart has contacted me before and asked me about making plans to kill his father, his mother, and his brother.
Adam Hipp has no leads to the killer, but he reveals a second, previously unknown murder plot, aborted at the last minute, in which he was recruited to be the shooter.
One of the plans that he laid out to me that he and Bart had discussed was an exact mirror image of the actual crime scene.
Sergeant Slott decides to hatch a plot of his own. He enlists Adam Hipp to trick his friend Bart on a tapped phone line.
He told me how your mom and your brother were killed and how your dad and you were shot. All that was very similar to what one of our plans was.
Stop saying our plan.
Okay.
It wasn't, so stop saying that.
All right.
I was very, very, very afraid of what he had to say.
On the phone tap, Bart agrees to pay Adam $20,000 hush money.
You say at least $20,000?
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll work out the details.
Using a courier service, he sends Hipp a $250 down payment. But then he does something brazen, signing the waybill with the name of a murderer borrowed right from a Hollywood movie.
Anybody could have worked for Soze. You never knew. That was his power.
Kaiser Soze, played by Kevin Spacey, is the criminal mastermind in the hit film The Usual Suspects.
Blatant fingerprints. That's what all those markers are. Every one of them on the package that was identified came back to Bart Whitaker.
With Adam Hipp's story verified in the crime lab and in wiretaps, there's a new urgency to warn Kent Whitaker about his son.
We feel wholeheartedly that he is responsible for this and that you are living with a murderer, that you are living with a man who intended to murder you. You need to make a decision as to how you want to handle that.
But to protect the investigation, Sergeant Slott gives no details.
I knew they couldn't show their whole deck of cards, but they could at least tell me something if they wanted me to believe them.
Kent's response to me was, you guys are either way wrong or my son's a monster.
At this point in time, you still don't believe he had anything to do with it.
I'm not 100% sure of anything. At this point, I think it's possible he did.
Do you fear for your own safety at all?
No, I slept well. I slept well.
He did not move out of the home, and it was very soon after that Bart went missing.
On a July morning in 2004, 7 months after the murders, Bart's abandoned SUV is found with its engine running outside a Houston apartment complex.
And it was crushing, Mary, because up until then, there was at least one member of my family that was still here. And now he's gone.
When we come back, police struggle in their search for Bart.
I had nowhere to look for him and no leads to follow up on to try and find him.
Could another family be in danger?
He said, don't be angry at your parents anymore. If you want, we can kill them.
Stay with us. Bart Whitaker is the prime suspect in the ambush of his family. Police are about to get a major break in the case, but before they can arrest Bart, they first have to find him. Once again, Mary Fulginiti.
Suralvo, Mexico, a tough little town about 50 miles south of the border. It's a world away from Sugar Land, Texas. And that's just fine with the American stranger who suddenly lands here looking for work and a new identity.
He caught my attention because he was different. Abuelito, a young white guy.
It was a very unusual thing because you don't see American workers right here in a little town in Mexico.
Osvaldo Benavides and his close friend Ubaldo Salinas quickly accept the likable man who says his name is Rudy Rios.
He told me his name was Rudy. He was a nice person.
But their newfound friend is no Rudy at all. He's Bart Whitaker, prime suspect in the ambush of his entire family back in Texas.
He told us he was a soldier.
That was my legend down there.
Bart's cover story is designed to explain the wounded left arm and erase his true identity.
I was a soldier that was AWOL because I had been shot up and didn't want to go back. That was something that was told from the very first minute I was down there in order to cover me.
Alias Rudy Rios, Bart begins turning up at church and turning on the charm for a guitarist he meets there, Cindy Lou Salinas.
He would bring me flowers. Look, I brought you flowers. I thought he was so handsome. And I don't know, mysterious.
Misterioso.
She brings her new boyfriend home to meet her parents. He's an immediate hit. Her father, Homero, even hires him to work at the family's furniture store.
I ended up loving him like a son. Very, very much.
Did you love them back?
Yeah, we were very close.
Cindy Lou knows nothing of her boyfriend's true identity. But one night, she gets a terrifying glimpse. It's what he says while consoling her after she smashes her guitar during an argument with her mother.
He said, no, relax. Let's fix things. He said, don't be angry at your parents anymore. If you want, we can kill them.
She feels fear that night, but it makes no sense. Like Bart's father, she feels she knows him better than that. But by now, even Kent Whitaker is beginning to believe the worst.
When he ran away, it kind of kicked the third leg out of the stool, and he must actually have been involved. By that point in time, I'm thinking it's pretty hard for me to extend any potential arguments against it.
Sugarland homicide detective Sergeant Marshall Slott needs no convincing. But more than a year after the murders, he still has no physical evidence, no clue who fired the murder weapon, and no idea what happened to Bart Whitaker.
I had nowhere to look for him and no leads to follow up on to try and find him. So that was disappointing at times.
He scours Bart's SUV and townhome at a country club north of Houston, where Bart lived while he was pretending to be in college. All to no avail. He interviews Bart's roommate, Chris Brashear, and a close friend who lives 2 doors down, Steve Champagne. The investigation is cold until...
Almost 2 years after the crime occurred, Stephen Champagne called me.
In the biggest break of all, it turns out the neighbor, Steve Champagne, has a conscience, and it's eating at him. He has a terrible secret, and a confession to make that involves both he and Bart's roommate, Chris Brashear.
When they came in the house, Chris was to shoot them all.
That was absolutely the break we needed.
Champagne gives up the entire story of what happened on the night of December 10th, 2003.
What was Bart's part in the plan?
Pretty much set it all up. He was trying to get them all together for, kept saying, for his graduation from college.
We got ready for dinner, and we went to dinner. And Stephen followed us in the car to make sure that we went there.
How did you know which restaurant?
Bart had told me before they left.
As the Whitakers unknowingly celebrate Bart's bogus college graduation, Steve Champagne watches from the parking lot. Meanwhile, Bart's roommate, Chris Brashear, hides in Bart's SUV outside the Whitaker home.
At that point, Chris got out of the vehicle and entered the house with the key and the alarm code.
Did you see them leave, Papa Doe?
Well, yeah. So then I pretty much followed them home. They pulled in the driveway, and I just kept going, just around the block, behind, like 1 block over.
And that's where you stopped and turned off the car and waited about a minute?
Right. And then in a minute, Chris came walking out to the car and got in the back seat and said that Bart's brother had walked in first, and when Chris shot him, he said before he shot him, he thought he smiled. And then Chris shot his mom, and then shot Bart's dad in the shoulder. And then he acted like he wrestled around with Bart and shot Bart in the shoulder.
Unaware of Champagne's confession, Chris Brashear agrees to an interview, but quickly becomes very uncomfortable.
I'm just gonna go. Is that
sure.
all right? There's the door.
To Sergeant Slott, Steve Champagne's confession yields the one thing that links this trio to the crime. He mentions a key piece of evidence that only the police know about. A single glove dropped by the shooter and found beside Bart's SUV.
We knew about the missing glove, and obviously we had this glove in evidence already. So everything fit together just based on one small piece of evidence.
But Sergeant Slott still has no physical evidence to link Bart to the murders until now.
Stephen Champagne explained to me that he and Chris Brashear had thrown items from the crime scene into a bag and thrown that off of a bridge that runs over Lake Conroe near Bart's townhome in Willis.
Sergeant Slott describes sending a dive team to the lake. It's a long bridge, but on their third attempt, divers come up with a duffel bag.
It was back over here underneath the bridge, between the third and fifth pylon in that general area, in about 20 foot of water.
In the soggy bag, a treasure trove of decomposing evidence. It's a windfall for crime lab investigator Max Hunter, beginning with an innocuous-looking plastic water bottle.
You just go around the rim of the bottle.
And even after 2 years in the bottom of a lake,
They were able to obtain a DNA profile from that swab, and that DNA profile matched the DNA profile from Chris Brashear.
among the other items in the bag, a rare brand of ammunition identical to the fatal bullets, a glove that matches the one found at the crime scene, a pry tool that matches the marks on the Whitaker's safe, and a badly damaged cell phone. A high-tech data reconstruction process at a lab in the UK identifies Bart Whitaker as the owner. Finally, Sergeant Slott has the physical evidence he needs to link Bart to the murders.
This is the eureka moment.
This was definitely when we said, we've got it.
But where is Bart Whitaker? Sergeant Slott obtains an arrest warrant, but he does not know that Bart, now known as Rudy Rios, is hiding in Mexico. And then the biggest break of all, a phone call from the real Rudy Rios. When we come back. How does a seemingly normal, fun-loving boy raised in a beautiful home by caring parents
What is that thing? Whoa!
turn into a scheming monster who would direct the bloody ambush of his own family and even take a bullet in the arm to make himself look like a victim?
Take one.
As ominous as this childhood game may seem today, no one could have predicted it would happen for real, years later, in the same room of the same house.
Someone has just shot our neighbors. Apparently the whole family's been shot.
So what went wrong, Bart?
Can we stop for a second? I don't know where it started.
Bart Whitaker may be at a loss for words, but Sergeant Marshall Slott is not.
How do I reconcile what Bart did to his family? I'm only left with the conclusion that Bart Whitaker's a sociopath, a true sociopath.
And back in the summer of 2005, he's also worried because Bart is missing and Sergeant Slott is convinced he could kill again. Unknown to the police, Bart is hiding in Mexico under the alias Rudy Rios, has charmed his way into a new family and talked about killing them.
Vamos a arreglar las cosas. He said, don't be angry at your parents anymore. If you want, we can kill them.
Cindy Lou Salinas is scared, yet unaware that the boyfriend she knows as Rudy is a fraud with experience directing a plot to murder his family, which today he astonishingly describes as a game.
Bart, do you feel like you have a conscience?
Yeah, absolutely. That whole plot, it was always I hesitate to use the word game because people love to take what I say and twist it, but it was sort of like a game of chicken between me and the other guys. Who flinches?
Did you feel any guilt? Did you feel any shame?
I wasn't feeling much of anything, but yeah, it was there. It was just on a level that I wasn't paying any attention to.
He seems singularly without remorse and without even the beginnings of remorse.
A classic sociopath, says psychiatrist Dr. Edward Hollowell of the Hollowell Centers in New York and Boston.
When he says he feels remorse and he feels guilt and he feels shame, you don't buy it.
I don't. I was struck in the interview that he showed almost no emotion. It was almost like he was mouthing the words. It was chilling. I was just blown away. Here's this young man who's done about the worst thing a person can do, and it's as if he's talking about the weather.
That observation is confirmed in the confession of getaway driver Steve Champagne.
Did you ever see any signs of remorse in Bart?
No.
And it gets worse. Champagne says Bart also talked about wanting to finish the job and kill his father.
What if the diagnosis is you are a sociopath?
Well, then I am what I am.
In Bart, Dr. Hollowell also sees a narcissistic personality.
It's an extremely dangerous combination, extremely dangerous, because you have no guide, you have no internal brakes, and you have this tremendous feeling of emptiness, so you want stimulation. You want to somehow feel alive. And the normal things that make people feel alive, love, attachment, bonding, that's all gone. I mean, having these fantasies of murdering your family, I mean, he had to go to that length to feel alive.
Finally, in September 2005, the climax in a long string of unsolicited witnesses, hard police work, and some good luck comes in the form of a phone call. It's the real Rudy Rios, and he has the final answer to Sergeant Slott's last big question. Where is Bart?
I know where he's at because my family has taken care of him.
A busboy at a country club near Bart's home, Rudy Rios tells the police he sold his identity to Bart and helped him escape to Mexico for a couple of $1,000s. Now he's prepared to sell out his friend for a $10,000 reward from the police.
But if there's a reward, I'd turn his head in.
I'm thinking this is the break we need. When Rudy Rios gave me this information and it seemed to check out, I was ecstatic.
Bart Whitaker is arrested in Mexico without incident, having harmed no one during his time as a fugitive. And on the road back to Sugar Land, Sergeant Slott has only one unanswered question for his prisoner.
The only thing I really want to know at this point is, how did you get all of these people to do such horrible things for you? And Bart responded to me that it was easy. All he had to do was give them what they wanted.
What was y'all's benefit for doing this?